Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Faisal. I'm a junior doctor working in the UK, and if you're new here, I make videos on medicine, productivity and just general life stuff. So this video is a Q&A. I asked you guys on Instagram to throw some questions at me because I just hit 500 subscribers recently. Thank you all so much. It really means a lot to me. There's been a lot of really good questions and I'm trying to answer as many as possible, so this video might be a little bit long. I'm not sure how long it will end up being, but I'll leave timestamps in the description below. Just click each and every question, whichever one you want to see, and it should make you jump to that question. There's quite a few topics that came up, so I kind of categorized them as well. So the first topic was life as a doctor, then life in medical school, applying to medical school, and then there is just general life stuff, some more interesting questions, there's sort of miscellaneous stuff, and finally productivity and my sort of creative side. The first question is by Fatiha_93. How did COVID impact you as a doctor? What lessons have you learned in your first year as a doctor? So COVID impacted, I think, doctors in like different phases. Like in the beginning, it was sort of like a very foreign problem, like it was very far away from us. And I remember when like the first cases started to creep in, we'd be like sort of checking to see, patients being admitted to A&E. Word started spreading that people with coronavirus were actually coming to our hospital, so that was pretty crazy. And I know the central London hospitals were like really starting to get rammed with COVID patients, but now it had finally reached us. So I had like different levels of anxiety, I kind of felt a little bit scared as well because I've got asthma, and I felt like, when you have that sort of feeling that you might just be one of these unlucky ones that gets hit really hard by something. So even though I was lucky enough to be in the pediatric ward where kids don't really get COVID in the same way that adults do, they tend to be less affected in general, I felt kind of protected in that way, but at the same time it was still around us, I had to walk around the hospital. It's kind of scary like that. And also something that you guys probably don't know, that I actually had coronavirus. I didn't have the really severe symptoms that like most other people had. I had a bit of back pain. I could feel like I was coming down with something, and the night before I had to go to work, I actually just told my team, I was like, I feel like I've got something. I've got a bit of a slight cough. I've got some back pain and stuff. Like I didn't get any fevers, but my heart was racing the night before. Like I had to go to work, so I told them, look, I don't think I should come in, and they agreed. And the next day I woke up. Luckily, I was really scared to wake up. I was like, shit, I'm gonna wake up with a fever. I'm gonna be really unwell. But thankfully, I woke up and I didn't have a fever. I felt pretty okay, but I had to isolate for 7 days since the onset of those symptoms. So seeing as I already started to feel a little bit better, I still had the back pain, but in that time I actually created my first YouTube video, which I was planning at around the same time, but seeing as I had about 7 days off, I actually made my first YouTube video. And so if you go back to my first YouTube video, I actually had coronavirus in that video. I had the antibody test recently and that was positive, so I think that kind of confirmed that it was most likely in that exact time. So yeah, in terms of actually lessons learned as a junior doctor, I think I'll make a separate video for that just because there's so much to talk about, and I still got like a month left before I'm officially moving on to the next year, so I'll do that in another video. Okay, so the second question is by Rehan XA. What is the jump like between medical school and working as a junior doctor? So I think there's a real misconception amongst medical students that when you join as a doctor for the first time, you need to know everything. Like everything needs to be at the forefront of your mind, which is really so far from the truth. In reality, you join and you're basically, in the beginning, you just have to kind of get to grips with how the hospital works, mainly because actually studying and how medical students approach learning in the clinical setting is very different from actually having to do the jobs yourself and having that accountability that, some of these jobs now rest on you to get done. So a large part of the early stages of being a doctor were sort of me getting to grips with what, how to navigate the hospital, how things ran. And I'd also say that it's largely about pattern recognition rather than actually knowing like how to deal with someone and how to completely look after someone. I think you have to learn from your senior doctors, you have to learn from the nurses, you have to learn from the pharmacists, and just see what they're doing, and you start to pick up certain trends. It's a lot about just learning specifics to the environment that you're in. And yeah, so pattern recognition is probably the thing that you'll be doing most, and a lot of admin work. That being said, on the on-calls, there's a lot of independence. So those were the times where I felt like I was actually being thrown in to the deep end and stand on my own 2 feet and just having to sort of learn from getting things wrong, having to ask, senior doctors, oh, I don't know how to do this. There's a lot of that in the early stages. Later on down the line, you start to remember how you did it the last time. You learn very quickly. It's a very steep learning curve. But I would say the jump from medical school to being a doctor isn't about knowing, it's more about the doing side. Okay, so question number 3 is from Cosmet Medicine. Do you actually think you'll enjoy general practice, and what are your reasons for this? Okay, so I think it's really funny that people automatically assume that if somebody has aspirations or something, going for GP is sort of like a sellout or a cop-out, that you've sort of given up on the more high achieving specialties, and there's a real stigma about that whole topic amongst medical students around doctors. But I made a whole separate video on why I sort of made the switch from surgery to wanting to apply to GP, so you can watch that. Actually, I haven't actually talked about why I specifically wanted to do GP, so let me tell you a few of the plus sides to being a GP, which I had in my mind. Number 1 is really broad. There's a broad spectrum of diseases and conditions that you'll actually see. I kind of prefer being a generalist in that sense than to be a super subspecialized person. Everyone has their own preferences, but that's personally, I think it'll be nice to stay on top and kind of know my medicine for everything. Secondly, there's lots of patient contact. You're basically sitting there in front of someone for 10 minutes. There is a large element of time pressure and admin work that kind of detracts from being, really present in the moment amongst GPs. But at the same time, I think the first point of care for anyone who's seeking medical attention is usually a GP. So having that kind of relationship with patients is really nice. Thirdly, the flexibility and the spare time which you get. So I've been told by a lot of my GP colleagues that an average GP would work about 3.5 days a week, and that would be like a full-time salary. There's a lot of demand for GPs, I think, because it's sort of broken up into sessions. So you can work a morning session, you can work an afternoon session, and you can kind of slot these in whenever you want. And I think there's so much flexibility there to work on things outside of medicine, which is something that I really want to do. I don't want to work full-time in the future. I'd probably do something more part-time and hopefully juggle some other interests that I have alongside. Also, it's a super short training program. It takes 3 years from after you finish your foundation year training, so that's F1 and F2, you do 3 years of training and you basically become a qualified GP. In other specialties, you sort of have to do anywhere between 5 to 7 years, sometimes even more, of training. You need to reapply at certain stages to continue that training, and to become a consultant at the end of it, which is the end goal, that takes 7, it's unnecessarily long. And so if I ever wanted to maybe work somewhere else or have that sort of position of being at the highest level of my specialty, being a GP only takes 3 years to do so. There's no progressing after being a GP to consultant GP. You're essentially a consultant of family healthcare, if that makes sense. I think the idea of actually just taking 3 years, becoming a qualified GP, I mean, if I don't like it, if I really despise it, I've only spent 3 years. It wouldn't be the end of the world to actually just go off and do something else. But yeah, there are some setbacks, mainly the idea of sitting in an office, having lots of admin, it just kind of comes across as I feel like when we go to a GP practice, or if anyone goes to a GP practice, you just imagine a really dull setting. It's just really quiet. There's not much action going on. It's sort of that boring person sitting in a chair, just sort of typing and talking to you. But I've seen some really interesting and great patient interactions with GPs, some super amazing GPs. They've got brilliant relationships with the patients, and the work setting is so nice, it's so comfortable, they live a good lifestyle. There's a lot of different factors that come into play, but there's also a lot of technology sort of merging with general practice. Companies like Babylon Healthcare, telemedicine, there's all these different things that are coming into the world of general practice. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not I might want to explore that in the future. So yeah, those are some of the reasons why I personally chose to be a GP. Okay, the next question is by Sana Badat. This is someone I actually know from university. Hi Sana. Would you ever want to practice medicine abroad? Okay, so this is actually a question I get asked a lot, and I actually ask other people this a lot as well, just because I like to hear what they have to say about it. So the few reasons I can think of actually practicing medicine abroad. Number one, it wouldn't be to experience another healthcare system. I'm not too interested in that. I think the main thing would be, number one, pay. It's the elephant in the room, especially for most doctors talking about moving from the UK elsewhere, because places like America, New Zealand, sort of some of these Arab countries, they pay a lot more, and the benefits there are amazing. So I know a lot of people who have transitioned straight from medicine as a junior doctor, or straight from medical school actually, to places like America. One of my good friends, Shireen, she's also got a YouTube channel. She's actually made the move to America, and she just started residency, so congrats Shireen. You can check out, she's got a course if you're interested as well. I'll leave a link in the description. I've also known some people who have moved to some Arab countries. I know they pay incredibly well. Some of my friends have had sort of short-term goals of actually moving there, like earning a bit of money, like so that they can come back, maybe put a deposit on a house or something like that. But that's like a short-term thing. I'm not sure if I would ever consider a long-term move anywhere else, mainly because my family are here, and at the end of the day I don't think there's anything that can really replace that. So yeah, no amount of money could make me permanently move away from all my family and friends and stuff. But who knows, maybe like a move for a couple of years might be on the cards. You never know. I change my mind quite often, so you just have to watch its space, I guess. Okay, so the next question is by Ella the Explorer _. So the question is, your dream career? So my dream career would be, number one, part-time medicine. So that would be like maybe 2, maybe max 3 days a week. I would love to have sort of passive income streams that mean that I'm not completely reliant on having to trade my time for money. So for example, if I was ill, traditionally that would mean that, okay, I can't go into work, I'm not going to earn. But if you have passive income streams, then essentially you've got that sort of comfortable, like, what's that word again? Safety net. You've got that safety net, knowing that you can actually sort of like fall back on a basic amount of income that can get you by. Also, I really love education and like educating people. This is something that I would do like even for free, something that I could probably do as sort of like, some courses I could probably do as like a paid sort of venture, depending on what it is. But it feels good basically teaching someone and seeing that they're actually learning, they're actually benefiting from you. And I know that, the response from students when they're taught correctly in a way that actually, that sort of light bulb moment goes off in their head, that they're really appreciative as well. So I've always loved teaching, so there's definitely going to be an aspect of that in my life. Maybe as a university lecturer, also maybe hosting courses, which is something I do already. I would also say building like services and products is something that I'm really interested in. So sort of entrepreneurship, I'm not really too keen on having a whole sort of startup that takes over my entire life, but being able to create something that people want, people are willing to buy, that really excites me. Maybe in the future I'd like to have some sort of time to be able to continue those sort of things. And finally, I would say having some sort of creative projects on the side of whatever I'm doing to actually just allow me to kind of have a creative outlet, play around with things, play around with ideas, and just actually put something out into the world that is just coming from my own mind that people might enjoy. A large part of that comes from, right now, my YouTube channel, so that's probably the biggest thing. Then I've got a newsletter which you can check out below on personal growth, medicine and things like that. And even like Instagram and just sort of editing pictures and putting them out into the world. It's just nice to actually have that creative side to a certain extent. But yeah, I think all those things together would probably be my dream career. There might be things I'm probably missing out on, like having time to spend with family and things like that, but for the large part, I think that's on the career side, that ticks all the boxes. Okay, so this question is pretty funny. So medicine obviously involves intimate care, I think you could call it this. So things like inserting catheters or assisting in delivery, how do you manage with the awkwardness? This question's by _Zuleika.b_. Okay, so I would firstly say that things are only really sort of embarrassing or awkward when you're sort of practicing things. So if you were to practice on a model or something like that, that's a bit embarrassing because you're doing something without the immediate need to actually help someone. But in real life, when you're actually treating someone and you need to, say for example, insert a catheter or something, you need to remember that we don't, like as medical professionals or healthcare professionals, we don't do anything that isn't necessary. Like why would we waste our own time? Why would we bother someone else? So everything we do is specifically for the aim of actually helping someone, like, or monitoring them so that they don't become more unwell. So say for example, if somebody can't pass urine and their bladder is filling up, they're going to be in incredible pain. So if you have to put a catheter in to like sort of drain out all the urine, then you're actually saving them from all that pain. Like the immediate relief they get from when you put it in is like, you can see it on their faces, and it's, at no point have I ever sort of stood there and thought, oh, this is kind of awkward, this is sort of funny. Actually, no, you might feel it a little bit depending on the situation, but at the end of the day, you remind yourself in the moment that there's a reason why I'm doing this, okay? Similar to, like, say for example, if one of your close friends came and said like, I've got like intense pain coming from like somewhere here, can you check it out? And it's in like a private region, for example, you wouldn't start laughing at them. Well, I hope you wouldn't anyway, but you would probably say, okay, like, damn, okay, I'm gonna try and help you, and you'd probably have a look and try and help them. You'd find it more serious. So for anyone who's not a medical professional, like, that's probably the best way I can explain it. Like it's a serious, there's a reason why we do things, so it wouldn't be awkward because of that. So the first question is by Rehan XA, I think that's Rehana. Is there anything you regret doing or not doing in medical school? Okay, that's a good question. So number one, I think it's important to just say, like, I'm super grateful for the opportunities I've had. If I were to say I regret not being able to do this, that would just be me being picky, because I largely feel very privileged to have done everything I've done. But I would say number one, reading books. I never read books. I haven't read books since I was like younger. I used to read like fiction, but it was only when I tried to set up my first business that I realized there were so many things I didn't know, and I didn't know where to start looking for them. One of my good friends, I think it was a friend called Nasser, who actually just sort of pointed at me. He's like, just read, bro. Like, he just made it seem so like I was an idiot for not doing it before. But I didn't know what like non-fiction books or these self-help books could actually like consist of. I didn't actually believe that they would have the answers to the questions I had. But once I started reading, I just started ripping through books, because they literally gave like so much good advice that I just started reading different self-help books and business books and things like that. So there's still a lot. I still mainly read like non-fiction, so like self-help books and things like that. But I would generally think that if I had sort of started doing that early in medical school, as opposed to towards the end of medical school, like, I would be a much smarter person. I'd be a much more all-rounded person. I probably could have got like a bit more ahead in terms of my career in life in different ways. But I'm not really too fussed about it. At the end of the day, I'm really happy where I am now. If I had to make a second point, it would probably be that I regret not studying the science of how to learn better. So I did a lot of like self-experimentation of what worked for me and what didn't work for me. But I think I would have really benefited from someone like Ali Abdal. If he had made a YouTube channel in like 5-6 years ago when I had started, I probably would have incorporated like everything he took in. I actually did incorporate quite a few things that he said, especially like the Google Sheets of active recall method. I did that in my final year medical school. That really helped. But otherwise, you just kind of like find your own way. And as long as you're willing to acknowledge that, you might not be doing things in the best way, and that there is maybe potentially a better way out there, and you're willing to take the small steps towards that, I think that's the main sort of mindset you need to just push you ahead. Okay, we've got another question by Rahana. She's asked some pretty good questions, to be honest. You've mentioned learning to learn in medical school. what was your learning style? Okay, so first of all, I learned very early on that I couldn't focus in lectures as much as I'd like to, and I was very lucky to have most of my lectures actually recorded, so I can watch them online, I could speed them up, I could pause them. So I just sort of told myself, look, you're not paying attention in lectures, just watch them when you get home. That's probably one of the best things. I was really honest with myself, and I did that. And what I did was, we'd have the lecture slides like printed off for us in like, you know, sort of like 6 slides per sheet, and I would watch the lecture and annotate anything that the speaker said that wasn't directly on the slide, or anything that could help me understand the context of those slides. I would write down around the actual lecture slide, so then everything was sort of stored. Everything that from that lecture was all on that like piece of paper. I didn't really make notes as I went along, but towards the end of towards the end of the year, once I was going over the notes and I figured out what I didn't know as well, the sort of points that I should really be drilling into the back of my head because I kept forgetting, I would sort of write out those as my notes, and I'd sort of go over those, because that's like high yield learning for me, because I put all the things that I really needed to focus on and the things that I didn't know. Okay, I'm waffling. Finally, I would say that I self-experimented, like I just said in the last question. I sort of played around with what worked for me, what didn't. In the early years of medical school, I think you can do that mainly because most of your overall sort of grade that you get at the end of medical school, the thing that actually really counts towards where you end up getting your job and things like that, really relies on the sort of last few years of medical school. We're quite lucky because we're doing like 5-year degrees, 6-year degrees. You got those first couple of years to just experiment with different ways. I'd say just watch them. There's a lot of like amazing study tubers out on YouTube now. Just watch some of their videos. I'm sure you do already, but just play around, see what works for you best. So that's how I sort of figured out my learning style. Okay, what was your hardest year of medical school? This question's by Cosmic Medicine again. I would say the year after my integrated BSc. So for those of you who don't know what integrated BSc is, it's a 1-year degree that gives you like a bachelor's or basically a whole degree that you only do in 1 year, and you sandwich it in the middle of your medical school degree. So I did 3 years of my medical degree, took it 1 year out, did the integrated BSc in surgery and anatomy. I've made a whole separate video on that, you can check that out somewhere here. And when I came back straight into medicine like the next year, I felt kind of stupid. Number one, because I was living with some of my friends who were just sort of like, they had come straight from that clinical, like the previous medical year, so they all had all that information fresh in their mind, and I felt kind of stupid, the fact that like I couldn't remember a lot of the things. And I also remember like the year before doing my integrated BSc, I had made that company, right, a teaching company, and that started bringing in these thoughts into my head about, damn, should I have like a certain aspect of that in my future career? It started throwing some doubt into my mind, and this year was sort of, it wasn't smooth sailing for me. It was a lot of sort of ups and downs, and I think I've kind of struggled in a way. That's probably the 1 year that I sort of struggled, just because I was very conscious of the fact that, number one, everyone else was like, I felt like the dumb one, and number two, I had this sort of nagging at the back of my mind that maybe I should consider, you know, doing some sort of entrepreneurship in the future. And it started, yeah, it just added a bit of doubt into my mind about whether or not medicine was really right for me. Okay, the next question is on the Academic Foundation program. This is by Ghazala Tassin _. So, information on the positives and negatives of choosing a particular deanery for AFP is vague. How did you decide? So I had a few, like, there was very few criteria that I really placed importance on. Number one, the topic. So at the time I wanted to be a surgeon, right? So I wanted to either do an AFP in surgery or medical education. I love medical education, but also I thought, you know what, med-ed would actually be really a smart decision, because what you can do with med-ed is you can focus it towards whatever specialty you want to do. So you can, like, say for example, if you were doing a project on medical education, you could do it in surgical education or med-ed on psychology if you're interested in psychology. So you can kind of twist it to whatever you want to do. Whereas if I did an AFP on the topic of surgery, if I did a AFP on the topic of surgery, realistically my supervisor would probably tell me to do some very like niche topic in some super specialized field that I might not even be interested in. So I think med ed was probably the way to go. Secondly, I would say the location. So I only really wanted to be around London or like Essex where I live. So I basically applied for just London and the EBH deanery. London has a cutoff. I knew I would probably have been cut off, but because the AFP, like the information for the AFP is actually really vague. This is one thing that I don't actually like. Most deaneries, all the information is probably outdated. Like they're not very transparent about their selection process, and it's bloody hard to find information online. So I was like going through this whole rabbit hole of finding information, but I read somewhere that maybe London might not introduce a cutoff. They never really admitted that, but they did in the end, and so that cut me off straight. So I was still lucky to apply for EBH. Also, the EBH deanery offers like a free PG certification, which is an additional degree in medical education, because that's what my AFP is on. But yeah, those were the three main points that I mainly considered. I talk a lot more about this. I co-authored a book with my friend Miguel. He's a super awesome guy. You can check out some of the work he's doing below on the topic of medical education. But yeah, if you're interested, check out the AFP handbook. It's got quite good reviews so far, thankfully. And we're hopefully making a second edition soon, so you can check that out. I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, the next question is by, is that HX Ryson 6? Is that Harrison 6? Something like that. How to deal with failure in medical school. Ooh, that's a deep one. So firstly, I'd like to think that I was quite lucky enough to not really have felt the sort of, that sinking feeling of feeling like a failure or having felt like I failed something. I definitely remember my first ever exam that I sat in medical school. Like I came from my secondary school where, not in a proud way, but I was a pretty top of my class and things like that. And then I came to medical school and I sat my first exam, which is sort of like a warm-up for the finals. And I just about passed. It was a fairly comfortable pass, but everyone else got so much higher, and I just felt like, what the hell? Like I actually worked really hard for that exam. And then I was like, okay, like this is a whole different ballpark. Like if I want to do amazing, I have to really step it up. So yeah, that's probably one time I felt like maybe a failure. Okay, so the next question is by Hannah by Afsha. How did you know you wanted to study medicine? So the truth is, I didn't know. I was lucky to have sort of achieved the grades I needed to be privileged enough to actually apply for medicine. My older brother was also applying for medicine. He's just 1 year above me. So I sort of kind of followed in his footsteps without knowing what I was doing. But right before I applied, I sort of said, wait, I need to actually consider whether or not I actually want to do this. And I weighed up the different options, and I realized, you know what? Medicine offers so much, like face-to-face contact with people, actually speaking to people in real life. There's technology which is coming into medicine, which is super exciting. You can, there's such a wide spectrum of specialties that you can apply for: GP, cardiology, surgery, that it felt like even if within medicine there's still like a big decision to be made in terms of specializing. So it didn't feel like I had really sort of thrown myself into a very narrow corridor, if that makes sense. There were so many different options available for me, even if I chose to be a doctor. Okay, and final question. There's quite a few questions similar to this, like top tips for med students going into clinical years. Question, it was by MZL_18. Okay, so my top tip would actually be that learning for the exam and learning to be a good doctor are like sort of two different things in a lot of different scenarios. So just because you know how to pass the exam and you know how to sort of pick up signs and do well in your OSCEs doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to be a good doctor, because there's so much more that isn't necessarily tested. For example, actually conveying real empathy with your patients, sort of taking the time to listen to them, communicating with them. I know OSCE sort of touches on that, but I feel like in real life it's very different, because doing it in real life and doing it with actors for a fixed mark scheme is very different. So I would say go to, during your clinical years, go to the hospital, really get stuck in and just ask the F1 or like a junior doctor to really throw real jobs your way and make you actually do the things that they do. so that you actually feel like you're a doctor. And only when you have that accountability of something going wrong, if you do it wrong, do you really sort of step up and actually start learning properly. And also, like in medical school, that's like one of the only times that you can really make a fool out of yourself, and still sort of people will they won't really care, because you're a student, you're there to learn, you're there to make mistakes. So part of me wishes that I could go back to like my first clinical year where I learned general medicine and just really get stuck in and ask stupid questions. Because now as a doctor, I mean, it's still good to, you should always ask, questions now, no matter how stupid you may think they are. But there is that sort of feeling that, you know what, maybe I should have known this by now. So as a medical student, just get stuck in, ask anything, make mistakes, and that's probably the best advice I would give you. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe. The remainder of the questions that I mentioned in the beginning of the video will all be put into part 2 of this Q&A, just because it really overran, so there's like another half-hour of footage. So look out for that. Otherwise, please follow my newsletter for weekly articles, and I will see you in the next one.